All right, so get this. We've got Khabib Nurmagomedov,
Huh.
UFC champion, fresh off a victory lap in Vegas. He's trying to get home. But here's the kicker. He gets booted off a Frontier Airlines flight. And everyone's
Sure.
asking, like, why? Was it a language barrier, like the airline's claiming, or something else entirely?
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher. And to get to the bottom of it, we've got like two key pieces of evidence. A news article with actual footage of the incident, and of course, the internet is buzzing with celebrity reactions.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll have seen the whole picture, you'll have heard the different takes, and maybe even uncover some of the hidden biases that might be lurking beneath the surface. Buckle up, because this is going to get interesting.
Okay, so let's start with the facts. Khabib was heading from Las Vegas to San Francisco, not Los Angeles, like some folks were saying. And here's a detail that might be important. He was sitting in the emergency exit row.
Okay, that's standard procedure, right?
Yeah.
Emergency exit rows. You need to be able to understand instructions, maybe help others. Makes sense.
Exactly. But it's the flight attendant's interaction with Khabib that really raises eyebrows. In the video, she says to him, well, we're going to move you to another seat because my flight attendants won't let you sit in the exit row. Or you'll have to get off this plane because they're not comfortable.
Hold on. Not comfortable. That seems pretty vague. What exactly were they uncomfortable with? Khabib says he speaks very decent English and was ready to assist. So what gives?
Right, and it's that word uncomfortable that sets off alarm bells. It's subjective. What makes one person uneasy might not faze another, so we have to ask. Was it purely a language issue, or was there something more at play?
And this is where things get really interesting. Khabib took to social media after the incident, and you could hear the frustration in his voice. He questions if the reason for his removal was racial, national, or other one. He even mentions that the flight attendant was very rude from the very beginning, even though he agreed to assist.
That's a crucial point. We're talking about a world-renowned athlete, someone who's used to being in the spotlight, feeling singled out and questioned. It definitely adds another layer to this whole situation.
But here's the thing that really throws me. Khabib was able to board another flight just 90 minutes later. So it wasn't like there weren't seats available. It feels like there's a missing piece to this puzzle.
There certainly is. And to find it, we need to dig deeper into the complexities of this situation. Could it be that the flight attendants were simply following protocol? Or could there be unconscious biases at play influencing their perceptions and actions?
Okay, so we've got this incident that seems straightforward on the surface, but the more we peel back the layers, the more questions pop up. We've got Khabib's side of the story, the airline's vague explanation, and now we need to consider the very real possibility of bias playing a role.
Exactly. And when we talk about bias, especially in a situation like this, it's often not about overt discrimination. It's about those subtle, unconscious biases that we all carry around. They're shaped by our experiences, our cultural backgrounds, even things we see in the media.
So you're saying that even if the flight attendants weren't intentionally targeting Khabib, their perception of him might have been colored by these unconscious biases.
Precisely. Think about it. Khabib is a well-known figure, a UFC champion. That comes with a certain image, certain stereotypes, whether we like it or not. He's also a Muslim man of Dagestani origin. Those factors, consciously or unconsciously, could have influenced how the flight attendants perceived his English proficiency, even his demeanor.
That's a really interesting point, and it makes me wonder, are there specific types of unconscious bias that could be at play here?
Absolutely. One that immediately comes to mind is the halo effect. That's where we tend to judge people based on our overall impression of them. So if someone is famous or successful, we might unconsciously assume they're also competent in other areas like language skills. Conversely, if we have a negative perception of someone, we might underestimate their abilities.
So in Khabib's case, his fame as a fighter might have actually worked against him. The flight attendants, perhaps unconsciously, might have viewed him through a lens of stereotype, rather than seeing him as an individual passenger.
It's a very real possibility. And then there's the concept of affinity bias, where we tend to favor people who are similar to us. If the flight attendants didn't share Khabib's cultural background or had limited exposure to people who look like him, that could have created a sense of otherness, leading to discomfort or mistrust.
Okay, so we've got the halo effect affinity bias. Are there any other types of bias that could be relevant here?
Well, there's also confirmation bias, which is our tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. So if the flight attendants already had some preconceived notions about Khabib based on his appearance or background, they might have unconsciously focused on cues that reinforce those beliefs, while overlooking evidence to the contrary.
So even if Khabib was speaking perfectly clear English, They might have fixated on a slight accent or a particular phrase, interpreting it as a lack of understanding.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the flight attendant's use of the word uncomfortable. It's subjective and doesn't provide any concrete evidence of a language barrier. It raises the question, was their discomfort truly based on Khabib's ability to understand instructions? Or was it rooted in something deeper, something unconscious?
It's a troubling thought, isn't it?
Mm.
That even in a seemingly straightforward situation like boarding a plane,
Yeah.
these hidden biases can surface and impact someone's experience.
It is, and it highlights the importance of recognizing and addressing these biases both on an individual and systemic level.
But some people might argue, hold on, isn't safety the top priority? Don't airlines have the right to be cautious, even if it means some passengers might feel uncomfortable?
That's a valid point. Of course, safety is paramount. But the question is, how do we balance safety concerns with fairness and respect for all passengers? If the criteria for assessing someone's ability to perform a task are subjective and potentially influenced by bias, then that raises serious concerns about equitable treatment.
So what can airlines do to mitigate these biases? Is it about better training for flight attendants, clearer protocols, or something more fundamental?
It's likely a combination of factors. Training programs that address unconscious bias are crucial. They can help flight attendants understand their own biases and develop strategies for mitigating them. Clearer protocols based on objective criteria rather than subjective feelings can also reduce the potential for bias to creep in.
It seems like there's a need for a real shift in thinking. It's not just about following the rules, but about understanding the human element, the potential for bias to influence our perceptions and actions, and the responsibility we all have to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
Absolutely. And it's not just about airlines. These same principles apply to any situation where power dynamics are at play, where individuals are making judgments about others based on limited information.
Okay, so we've really delved into the complexities of bias in this situation, but let's not forget the other key element we mentioned earlier, the celebrity reactions. They really blew up the internet and brought this whole incident to a much wider audience. It's amazing how a single incident captured on a cell phone video can spark such a firestorm. And when you throw in celebrity voices, it's like adding gasoline to the flames.
You're absolutely right. Celebrities wield immense influence, especially in the age of social media. Their opinions can shape public perception, fuel online debates, and even put pressure on organizations to take action.
Remember Conor McGregor's reaction? Even I'm surprised, he said. And coming from Khabib's former rival, that statement carries a lot of weight. It kind of validates Khabib's experience, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. McGregor's surprise lends credibility to Khabib's claim that the situation was unusual, even unfair. It suggests that even someone who knows Khabib well and might not be predisposed to siding with him found the incident perplexing.
And then you have Will Smith simply labeling the incident disgraceful. That's a powerful word, and it speaks to a sense of moral outrage. It frames the airline's actions not just as a mistake, but as a transgression against basic principles of fairness and respect.
It certainly does, and that's the impact of celebrity voices. They can elevate an incident from a personal grievance to a larger societal issue, prompting us to question not just the actions of individuals, but the systems and structures that might be enabling such behavior.
So we've got this incident, potential biases, and the amplifying effect of celebrity opinions. Where does that leave us? What does it all mean for the average traveler?
That's the crucial question. It's a reminder that even though we might not be UFC champions or Hollywood stars, we can all experience bias, especially when we're traveling. We're outside of our familiar environments, often interacting with people who are different from us. And sometimes those differences can lead to misunderstandings, misjudgments, and even discrimination.
It makes you think twice about those everyday interactions we have while traveling, doesn't it? The seemingly harmless glances, the subtle tone of voice, the way our words are interpreted. All of these things can be colored by bias, both conscious and unconscious.
And that's why this conversation is so important. It's about raising awareness, about recognizing that bias exists, and about understanding the impact it can have on individuals and on society as a whole. It's about challenging those biases within ourselves and creating a more inclusive and welcoming environment for everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs.
So what can we as individual travelers actually do to combat bias? It feels like such a huge systemic issue.
Well, it might seem daunting, but even small actions can make a difference. It starts with self-awareness, recognizing our own biases, challenging our assumptions, and being open to different perspectives.
That makes sense. But what about concrete steps? What can we actually do in those moments when we witness bias or feel like we're being treated unfairly?
One thing we can do is speak up. If we see someone being treated unjustly, we can politely but firmly voice our concerns. We can also document the incident if possible and report it to the appropriate authorities. And we can support organizations that are working to promote diversity and inclusion in the travel industry.
Those are all great suggestions. But sometimes it's not about confronting bias head-on, but about creating a more welcoming and understanding environment. Maybe it's about learning a few key phrases in another language, or simply smiling and making eye contact with someone who seems different from us.
Exactly. Those small acts of kindness and connection can go a long way in breaking down barriers and fostering a sense of shared humanity. It's about recognizing that we're all part of the same journey, even if our paths look different.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this thought. What if instead of seeing differences as something to fear or avoid, we embrace them as opportunities for learning and growth? What if travel became a catalyst for greater understanding, empathy, and connection?
That's a beautiful vision. And I believe it's a vision we can work towards one journey at a time. By being mindful of our own biases, by speaking up against injustice, and by extending kindness and understanding to those around us, we can create a world where travel is truly transformative, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
And on that note, we'll conclude our deep dive into the Khabib Nurmagomedov flight incident. We hope this conversation has challenged your assumptions, expanded your understanding, and maybe even inspired you to take action. Because ultimately, creating a more just and equitable world starts with each of us. Safe travels, everyone.